Most pest control companies are leaving money on the table and they don't even realize it. The problem? They're treating their phones like a customer service tool instead of a sales machine. Today, we're exposing one of the biggest competitive advantages in the industry, selling over the phone. If you think your office staff is just there to answer calls, you're already falling behind. In this episode, I'm joined by Raymond Kidwell, a 30-plus year pest control industry veteran and director of business development at Voice for Pest. He's built high-performing inside sales teams, mastered phone conversions, and helped companies transform their call handling into a revenue-generating powerhouse. Raymond is here to break down exactly how to structure your phone process, why most companies lose sales before the first visit, and how AI is changing the game. If you're ready to stop wasting leads and start closing more deals, this episode is for you. Raymond, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here. What an intro. That's a lot of pressure, but I think we'll be all right. Yeah, no, that sounds great.
I get the feeling you're going to crush it. No pressure at all.
Let's hope. That's why we're here, right? Trying to help people. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's jump right into it, shall we? I like to pack as much value into these conversations as possible. We don't have all day. Right off the bat, what are the key differences between pest control companies that quote unquote get phone sales and those that don't?
Well, one of the key differences is how fast they grow. Because if you're not utilizing phone sales, you're not growing nearly as fast as you could. So that's a big difference. But as far as the way companies are set up or their perspective, I guess, really the biggest differences are, I guess, understanding and realizing that, people buy different ways. And as we've seen, I mean, I'm an old guy, right? I've been around a long time. So I've seen the way people buy now is definitely different than the way people bought 15, 20 years ago. And people are just, more and more comfortable and really expect to be able to just do something very quickly. We all go on Amazon and buy something that shows up at our house the next day, sometimes the same day. So to be successful, you really need to position yourself to not just be able to communicate with your customers and leads any way they want to communicate with you, but also to sell them any way they want to be sold. And I think the biggest difference is that the companies that are using inside admin sales and using it effectively. It's not enough just to say we sell over the phone. It's like everything else. You got to really work at it and do it well. And the companies that don't, it's just they're limiting themselves. And it's really just the ability to focus on what I can do to put myself in a position to sell as much as possible any way people will buy. Is kind of the way I see it.
Interesting. And if we drill down into that, are there specifics of the companies who sell the way people want to be sold to? Like, what would be some of those ways people want to be sold to that over the phone that the companies who don't get it don't really, they struggle to wrap their head around?
Well, I think a lot of people just want to, especially today's world, everybody's busy and everybody just wants to be able to get something done and move on, right? I want to get it handled. So some of the ways is like, if you talk about the difference between just selling over the phone and then scheduling an appointment. A lot of companies sell over the phone, but then the technician, whoever goes out and actually gets the paperwork signed, things like that. And then you create failure points all along the way when you do that. So to me, the biggest difference is if you're going to sell over the phone, you really need to sell over the phone. When that person hangs up, in their mind, they bought that service from you. They're expecting a technician or somebody to show up and take care of that problem. I mean, they're done. It's a done deal. They've given you a payment method, those kind of things. Whereas sometimes selling over the phone is, okay, they said they'll buy it. We put it in and we put a ticket in and the technician shows up. Well, sometimes they actually follow through. Sometimes you run into a situation where it costs more, those kind of things. So the more you can do to close the deal, get it sold, when that caller hangs up, in their mind, they're a new customer, the better.
Got it. So it sounds like it's about speed, efficiency, and selling over the phone means closing that deal, right?
Selling means selling. It doesn't. And that's probably the biggest mindset difference is, like you started off, it's a great line, by the way, wish I thought of it, that, the CSR, how do you make your CSRs more than a CSR? And the funny thing is some people are better at selling over the phone than being a CSR over the phone, right? So that's another thing that companies need to understand, that just because you have people that are CSRs doesn't necessarily mean they'll be good at selling. But a lot of companies don't really, they just say, okay, we're selling, but they don't do anything differently. They just let people sell. And that's not going to get you as far as you want to be. That's for sure.
Understood. I appreciate you breaking it down that way. That makes sense. How did you transition from a traditional in-person estimate approach to selling everything but commercial pest over the phone?
Oh, it was a snap. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't. But so basically, and again, what I dealt with in my company where I worked specifically was we had 5 branches. And so each branch took the calls locally. They had local admin. A lot of companies are like that. And it kind of applies whether it's multiple branches or one single office where you have 5 or 6 people or 3, 4 people answering the phone. But some of the challenges we had, actually the biggest challenge we had wasn't the people making the sales. It wasn't the customers buying. It was everybody else. We had salespeople. were used to getting leads assigned to them, right? And there was a concern there that, well, what happens to our salespeople? They're not going to make any money. All the admin's going to take all the leads. The sales are going to be mismeasured and all those kind of things. So the biggest challenge was overcoming some of the objections or concerns of everybody else that was going to be affected. And I, anytime you want to bring change to an organization, there's a couple ways to do it. If you're the boss, you just say, hey, we're doing this, shut up and do it. Okay, that's one way. But the other way is, you want to kind of win the hearts and minds, right? So what we did is we tried to identify what was the pain points for everybody else involved and try to assure them that we were handling things properly. So for example, if we made a sale, the technician got 5% of the commission because we knew the technician was going to have to probably do a little more selling, maybe get the paperwork, or it was going to be a little bit different than the traditional out in the field sale. So we gave them commission because that way they were okay with having to do a little bit extra on an admin sale versus a traditional salesperson out in the field sale. That's an example. And we also did things for salespeople as well, where for every admin sale we made, let's say we sold lawn care, well, we created a lead for the salesperson to follow up to sell everything else, right? Because we sold pest, we sold termite. So we were able to give leads to salespeople that were already customers, which is a much warmer, better lead, right? So salespeople would rather have a warm lead. So it worked out that we had the technicians were okay because we paid them a little back. So we paid 15% commission for a sale. So we took 10% went to admin, 5% went to the technician. So the company was paying the same. Technicians were happy. Salespeople were happy because they were getting leads. That perspective, that was the biggest challenge, was making sure that when we did this, we could do it in a way that all of the other people it impacted took it as a positive. Because if they didn't, if the technicians were against it, if the salespeople were against it, then the managers, everybody would be against it. It's really tough to be successful. But that's kind of the biggest steps. And then we went into the actual, how do you actually handle the sales coming in? How do you route the calls and things like that? We can get into details of that if you want to. I just don't know how far you want to go on that question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like your priorities are pretty clear, right? And the point of friction was keeping morale up, right? And making sure that
Right.
incentives were aligned so that people felt good about that transition. Ultimately, we are in a people business. You're not in a technology business. And so the point of friction is often or pretty much always going to be, how do you make sure that during a time of change that your team is happy with the change? And also what I'm hearing is that they understand it, right? You're not just saying, do this because I told you to, but they actually
That's more
get
important
it.
than being happy about it, I think. I think the fact that they understand why, what the benefits are to them and to the company and to the customer, but most importantly to them. I mean, at the end of the day, we all love our jobs. We wouldn't be here if we didn't get paid, right? I mean, that's why we're here. So, employees are employees, and we want to make sure that, they understand the benefits to them. And there's going to be some pain. It may not always be a beneficial thing. There might be some negatives to some people, but if they understand the overall goal, the overall vision, and that this is a permanent change we're bringing in the company to make everything better, right? The more customers we have, that's better for technicians, right? So yeah, winning the hearts and minds and making sure that they understand why and what the benefits are, I think go a long way. Because all too often I've seen companies just come in and say, hey, this is what we want. You got the corporate staff up here in the glass tower, right? Deciding what's the best thing to do. And sometimes they are really good ideas, but you got to get people to buy in and people's input because other people have good ideas too. And maybe that technician has a really good idea that can help your overall inside sales effort. So that's kind of the approach that I've always taken and always tried to tell people is win the hearts and minds, get everybody involved. Sometimes you have to be the boss, say, yep, that's just the way we're doing it. I understand you don't like it. This is the way we got to do it. But as long as you explain it and do everything ahead of time, that usually doesn't happen too often.
Great value there, guys. If you're leading a team, which most people listening to this podcast are, making sure you're managing and leading and really enrolling people in your vision is the way that I would put it.
Be a champion. Be a champion. And if you're a champion and you're championing that cause, people are either going to lead you or get out of the way, right? One or the other. So there's a saying that I won't say because it's got a slight curse word in it, but you either lead, follow, or get the heck out of the way, right? So yeah.
Switching gears here, what are the biggest objections customers have over the phone? And how should sales reps handle them?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because we don't have to rely on what I think. Because now with our AI, we're able to analyze every lead call that comes in, and we can tell you, based on the breadth of all the customers we have, the number one objection to why people don't buy over the phone is they need to talk to somebody else. We call that a third-party advice, right? I need to talk to my spouse. I need to talk to my husband. That's the number one objection. Number two is, believe it or not, no reason. A lot of CSRs are letting people off the phone without telling them why they're not buying, right? And then price is not that big of an objection. objection. I think a lot of times people throw that over there. It's typically, I need to talk to somebody else from the biggest objection. Also, I need to think about it, or it's a little more than I thought, or they don't really have a reason, right? So those are the typical reasons we see. To me, like if somebody's calling your company and they're saying, hey, I'm interested in what you have, tell me about it, you really should sell them. I mean, that's, they really should. Now, everybody has price shoppers, right? But nowadays, I think price shopping is becoming less and less of a thing. I think people go and they look at the reviews, right? And they might talk to somebody. There's still true price shoppers out there. I'm going to call 5 companies and all that, but I think that's kind of a thing of the past for the most part. So if they're calling you, the chances are they want to buy from you. It's your responsibility to put your employees in the best position to close that deal. So overcoming objections is one. The biggest one across the board, I got to talk to my husband, I got to talk to my wife, I got to talk to my spouse. And that's about 35% across the board, is what we're seeing.
Interesting. And how should sales reps overcome that number one objection?
Oh, now you put me on the spot. I could be a salesman again. It's been a while. But no, the way I've always tried to help people with that is they called for a reason. They have a problem, especially if they have an issue, right? So you really want to focus on why they called you, what the issue is, and how you can resolve it, right? Oh, I need to talk to my husband. What is I'm assuming your husband knew you were calling to get some information. Yeah. Okay. Well, does the price sound good? Yeah, this price sounds good. Do you think we can take care of your problem for you? Well, let's go ahead and get it scheduled, right? Because your husband's going to talk to you, that kind of thing. It's you really have to do it based on the actual conversation. But basically, the number one way to overcome that objection is to try to turn around and just resell the value and resell the reason they called. They called because they have a problem. And they just kind of recap that. Okay, well, you called me because you have roaches in your kitchen, right? Your husband's at work. And the sooner we get this thing set up and scheduled, the sooner we can take care of your roaches. I'll tell you what, we can go ahead and get you set up. And if your husband comes home and decides you want to check, think about it, let me know. Stuff like that. I mean, I think there's ways to just kind of give them an opportunity. You don't want to sell a pre-cancel, but typically once they've committed and they've signed up, they're good to go. And a lot of times people will use that as an objection when it's not really. So if you just keep refocusing the values and the features and keep driving that home is usually the best way to, in my experience. I'm not a sales training professional, but in my experience, that's the best way to overcome it. Keep repeating the value and keep trying to get them to schedule.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is there's a degree of being curious, right? Like what is it that they actually are? What is the real problem, right? And so being curious means what is the pain point that they're really feeling right now? Also being curious means what's the real objection? Because it's that number one objection. As interesting as that it's the number one objection, but it's also often a smokescreen, right? So there's another objection there that might be the root cause of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. But that gets to the point of the best way to overcome objection is to not have one. So if you do a really good job as you're going through asking questions, by the time you make your pitch and go for the close, most of the time if you built it up the right way, you're not going to have as many objections, right? But if you just go, oh, I have roaches. Oh, we can take care of roaches. It's $150 for the first visit, $90 a quarter after that. I can have somebody out there tomorrow. How's that sound? Right? You've thrown information at them, but you really haven't gotten them involved in the conversation. You haven't built that rapport. I mean, people buy from us as much as they buy from a company. We all know that, right? So the more you can personalize that call, develop a rapport with the person, make them understand that you really want to take care of their problem, the less objections you're going to have, because the person that's calling is going to feel confident that they can make this decision and justify it to the other person they have to answer to or explain it to, right? Because if they just say yeah, and then the person comes home and says, what about this? Well, I don't know. I didn't ask. They didn't tell me. So I think you can do if you build the presentation right and focus on their pain points and provide solutions to them, at the end of the call, you won't have very many objections.
Right. So handling of the objections before they even come up is a big one.
Well, yeah. Tailoring your presentation to overcome their objections as you're doing it is really important, and that's why it's really good to ask questions. Oh, I have roaches in my underwear drawer, my kitchen. I have roaches in my kitchen, right? Well, how long they've been there, right? Ask some questions, like get some information. Are they little? Or are they big? When did you first start? Don't just jump in and throw out your canned presentation about what you do for roaches. Build a little relationship. It goes a long way.
This is a great transition into another question that I have, which is, what does a great call handling script look like for pest control sales?
That's a good question. So far, they've all been really good. I'm not surprised, but no. So with call handling, a script, basically what you want to do with the script is it has to be a little bit flexible. In my experience, trying to get people to verbatim, say what's on a script is pretty difficult. You have to let people use their own words. They have to talk their own way. Because if you've ever tried to not talk your own way, it's very difficult. And we've all been there. We've been in situations like at dinner with people and stuff. We really can't just be ourselves, right? So it's kind of hard. So you got to let people, basically the script should allow people to use their own words. So you give them bullet points or just, highlights. And the script should be flexible. So it starts off with basically an overview of the greeting. And in that overview, you want to make sure that you're listing the things you want your employees to cover, right? If you want them to verify the address and verify the phone number, put that in the script, right? Don't just assume that they know what you mean by greeting or something like that. Be very specific, and then give them the flexibility to change based on what the caller says. What's your problem? Well, I have roaches. Okay, then you can have AI scripts now that automatically change based on what's being said in the conversation. AI is listening and changing. That's relatively new. I think it's a little expensive, I think. But then there's a lot of scripts now that are dynamic scripts that change. Like we have a script that can change based on what they say. So you have your greeting and they say, oh, I have ants, and you go and you put ants and then it changes and it populates. It has to also give them the flexibility to be able to respond to different things. Oh, I have roaches in my kitchen. Okay, and then all of a sudden, you know what? I forgot to tell you, I also have this, right? I have that. So make sure you cover what you want them to say in the greeting part. Give them the specifics they need, but keep it general enough to where they can respond as they would and be comfortable with how they respond. You have your greetings, you have your kind of your sales presentation, where your needs and analysis, right? You're trying to find out what their problems are, break it into those sections, and then at the end you have your closing section, and then you can have some objections there. So I think it's greeting, needs analysis, closing, objections, but just give them the flexibility to be themselves within the constraints of what you want them to do.
I think that sounds like a fantastic framework. There's a lot to work with there.
Yeah, it's kind of loose.
Yeah, no, but to your point, that's what you need, right? And also, every pest control company does things different. They have a different kind of style, a different brand, and that's how they differentiate themselves, right, over the phone. So the flexibility in there makes sense.
You have to be people. We're all worried about AI replacing all of us, but for right now, we still have to be people. Yeah.
Speaking of AI, what role does AI play in helping businesses identify true customer calls versus leads, and how should these calls be handled differently?
Okay, that's another good question. I'll stop saying that's a good question. I'm going to assume all your questions are going to be good from now on. So
I appreciate. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm not complaining that
Okay, then I'll keep going. But if it's a bad one, I got to call you. No, I'm kidding. So
please do.
All right. What role is AI play in helping business identify? Okay, so the thing that AI is doing that just blows my mind, it does a couple things. First of all, it's doing things that humans can't do. It can analyze every single call. We can't do that, right? Analyzing calls is difficult. It's painful, and usually, unless you have somebody whose full-time job it is to do that, it's the 13th thing on the list to do. It doesn't get done very often. When it does get done, it's pretty painful. So it listens to all the calls. It doesn't listen, it analyzes all the calls. It's smart enough to take that in analysis and apply logic to it, knowledge to it, so it can tell you what happened with that call. And then it also provides you the information you need to take action. And the biggest thing to me that AI is doing, it's doing all of that without human beings having to do anything. Because if you think about it, we have all this call tracking stuff set up. We have all these different, we have workforce optimization. We have all these programs. You can go in and the manager, the supervisor can do this and run this report, all that. Well, AI is doing all that for us. So the biggest role, I think, is it's getting the data that managers, supervisors, owners need to run their business, to manage their call center, their leads and everything else without anybody having to do it. Because now, how does a pest control company know, A, how many leads they receive, and then how many of those leads they receive were actually viable leads they could sell, right? You have tracking numbers. Tracking numbers are great, but they tell you how many people called a tracking number. If I call a tracking number the first time I call you and sign up, when I have a call back, I'm just going to call you right out of my phone, the same number I called before. So now you have a call to a tracking number that's not a lead. So then you have to now decipher, well, out of that 100 calls, how many were leads? And that's very difficult to do. AI does it for you. It tells you exactly, out of that 100, you have 70 that were viable. The 30 that weren't, here's why. You don't provide the service they want. You don't provide the air. You're not in the area they need service done. It tells you all those things. So now you as the manager know these 70 calls I got were actually leads. And then AI is going to tell you exactly what happened. Did you sell them? No. Why not? So it's getting all that information in the data that we've really always wanted directly to us. And depending on who's providing you the AI, there's a lot out there, right? We try to curate it and give you AI in formats that pest control companies need, because at the end of the day, they're pest control people. A lot of these guys and ladies are really smart and they do a lot of different things, but they have better things to do, right? So we try to say, look, this is the AI data we think is going to help you. Here, you can access it all. It's over here in this big old bucket. Jump in and swim around if you want. Or we can also give you some curated data that's kind of like, here's the information you need. So the biggest role is it's getting the data to people and manage the employees and manage the process. It's accurate and it's right there where they need it to be.
And when you say you organize that data in the way that operator needs it organized, like what are a few of the ways that you organize that data and analyze it and present it to a pest control operator that is useful to them?
Okay. Well, a couple examples. We are finding, and this might shock you, that 20 to 30% of all the leads that come in are not getting put in this company's CRM. CSR takes a call, somebody wants to buy lawn care, pest, or whatever. For whatever reason, that person never gets entered as a new lead into the CRM. One reason is if you're judging your employees, if you're judging their closing percentage, if they don't sell a lead, it counts against them. Maybe that lead never gets put in the system, so it can't count against them. That might happen. Other things, people get busy. They take a call and they're busy and they write it down and then they forget to do it. So what we can do is we can send a list of all the leads that called in yesterday, however many days ago, that were never put in your CRM. We can send a list of all the leads that called in 5 days ago that have never been called back, right? Because we can see the outbound call. So if you think about being the manager of an inside sales team, how powerful would it be that I just get this report emailed to me every day? It says, hey, you had 27 people call you 3 days ago to buy something, and here's 24 that never got called back yet. You can even send that list to the individual salesperson, and then the next day you get the list of all the ones that they didn't call back. Stuff like that. We can do leads, we can do cancels, we can even send out retention risk, but specifically on the sales side, we can do leads, we can do objections, we can break it out any way you want. I want to see all the leads that Andrew had that he didn't sell, that didn't buy because the price was too high, right? Or whatever. So that's some of the ways that we're using AI to get it out there, to get it to people that need it. And then also the employee performance. You can have 12 parameters on you when it's judged. You don't need to listen to calls. We can tell you how good your employee's doing on handling the greeting, how good they're doing on overcoming objections. So AI is doing a lot of those things. I'm making it really easy for people to manage. And it's taking away the personality, the personalization. So if I'm your boss and I come to you and say, hey, Andrew, look, we got some challenges here today. That's one thing. But if I say, look, here's the data that AI is giving me, this, it's just impersonal data. Let's talk about it. It kind of takes the humanness out of it. And it's not as much of a negative thing, I think, whereas it's more just like, hey, here's data. AI told me this is what's going on. We got to handle this, as opposed to, I notice you're not doing this right. It's a little bit of a different perspective.
What an incredibly powerful sales tool AI has quickly become. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
really, it blows me away every day in marketing and sales. Those are the areas of the business that I mostly touch and help with. And the speed at which this is moving, the ability for us to your point, organize that data in order to empower our clients, in order to empower, in this case, sales reps and CSRs to do better work is just really, really amazing. So speaking of using that data to train CSRs, I want to double click on that. How do you train CSRs to convert more calls into booked services? We've touched on scripts, we've touched on leveraging AI data. I wonder if there's anything else to unearth there or anywhere deeper to go with those two things even.
Well, one thing is to incentivize one over the other, right? That's always a good thing to do. And when I say incentivize, I think, one of the things is if you're not paying some kind of commission, some kind of financial incentive, something, whether it's a contest or a day off, give those employees that are taking those sales calls a reason to do better, right? Just like, I see a lot of companies really focus on sales. The sales team goes out, they take them the top off, they do all this stuff, right? And that's great. But then when they do an admin sales, they do nothing for the admin. Admin's they're just taking phone calls. So I think that's one way is to incentivize it. Right. Make sure that, and when I say incentivize, pay more for a full contract sale over the phone than you would a one-time sale. Pay more for, if termite's a more valuable service for your company, pay more for them to sell termite. Pay them more to sell the services you want them to sell more of. Okay. It's not always about pay though, but that's the first thing. Let's incentivize it. Right. But also the other thing is just make sure you empower them just to make a deal, to sell what they need to sell. Because a lot of times it's biggest thing I think that people don't do is they don't help train CSRs to sell. They assume since they're already taking phone calls, then they can sell. And that's not true. It's a different skill set. Some people are really good at selling over the phone. Some people aren't as good. Some people are really good at taking care of customers. Yeah. So identify the people that are naturally predisposed to be good at it, but train everybody, help them. If you're not familiar with it, get somebody that can, because there is a difference in how people perform when they sell over the phone. And then what you can also do is identify those people that are better. And like, for example, we know when somebody calls a customer, we know if they're a customer already. So our customers can send leads to the two people that are really good every time first, right? Give them a shot at closing it. But if the people that are getting those leads, they need to understand, hey, we're giving you those first. You have a responsibility to do the best job of selling. But I guess to answer your question more directly, incentivize it, train them. Don't just assume that they know how to sell or they can sell well over the phone. right? You really need to work with them and especially make sure they understand the technical side of it. I think a lot of times owners, supervisors, managers, we all understand the bug side of it. We understand that part of it. A lot of times the office admin doesn't. We always sent our admin out to ride with a technician when we hired somebody that was going to be selling over the phone. We wanted them to see what it was like. We wanted them to understand what happens in the field. We wanted them to, really have a good understanding. So when they're talking to somebody, they're speaking as an authority, right? They're telling them things because they know that's how it works. They've seen it. Whereas I'm an office person and I know that we do a quarterly pest control. And we say, well, we do the exterior service. We apply granular products around the base of that. It's not the same. So give them the tools they need. Make sure they're comfortable with the service they're selling. Train them and help them be better at what they do. People want to do better, right? So I guess those are the main points.
Yeah, to your last point, I just had the pleasure of meeting Peter Chopin. Are you familiar with Peter?
That name sounds really familiar.
Yeah, he's been in the game a long time. He ran a successful pest control company that he sold and now does consulting for 50 plus pest control clients.
Sounds very familiar. I'm better with faces. I'd probably recognize his face, but
yeah, I'm sure. But and it was interesting talking to him about how does he think about running a pest control company, and he said he felt like one of the most overlooked areas of pest control companies, and especially when it came to helping your staff cross-sell and upsell and just sell period, was your last point, which is training your entire team all the way down to the CSRs about the technical aspects of business. And he would do a Fridays with Pete session, I think is what he called it, where he would train the entire team on different technical aspects of the service, so that, to your point, a customer service rep or sales, inside salesperson, can actually speak to the service that they're selling.
No, and that comes through on the phone. I mean, if that employee is comfortable and confident and knows what they're talking about, when we talked earlier about doing things to prevent objections, that's going to prevent some objections because, again, it's a visual, it's a auditory only, right? You can't see what's going on. So you're just going off voice, inflection, tone, and the fact that somebody knows what they're talking about, they're confident, and they're explaining to you something they've experienced makes them a much better salesperson. And if you think about, like, if somebody was walked up to you and said, I want you to sell me the benefits of this particular locomotive engine versus this one. That's going to be really hard to do because you don't really know much about locomotive engines, right? And somebody can describe it to you, but it's not the same. And it's the same thing. I want you to sell termite control, but you really don't have any idea what that means other than that we're going to kill termites, right? So the more they know about what they're selling, the better they're going to be at it and the better results you're going to get for your company.
Absolutely. And in marketing, we think about this too, right? Because your website should be your best salesperson. And therefore, we need to really understand the needs of the customer, the service that our client is selling in order to do a good job of selling. So this is particularly true in marketing and copywriting, where best copywriters, the best marketers, understand the product and the customer the best because they're able to really dig into the details of that and speak confidently and accurately about the service and recognize what's important to the customer. We're running a little bit short on time here, but I am loving this conversation. You are packing in a lot of value here.
So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And I guarantee you our audience and listeners do as well. Here's one that I know the audience, everyone likes to avoid mistakes, right? So what are the biggest mistakes pest control companies make when setting up their phone sales process?
That's another good question.
All right. I think I'm like 8 for 8 here or something.
You're 100%, baby. You are. If you were playing baseball, you'd have the record by far, right? Anyway, no, you're at that percentage is awesome. Biggest mistakes. I think one, and I'm going to make a very general statement. I think general statement across the board, pest control companies tend to take, I don't want to say this the wrong way, they tend to overlook the admin department. Right. The admin department, they're typically, quote unquote, ladies in the office, right? Obviously, that's not true. There's a lot of people in the office, but when you think of a traditional pest control company, you got a couple ladies in the office, right? And the thing to remember is they do a lot of things. Typically, in a traditional pest control company, you have somebody that answers the phone is also doing the billing, doing the POs, they're printing the tickets, they're doing all these other things, right? So then what happens is that phone call becomes an interruption to all the other work they have to do. The manager's waiting on them to do the schedules for this afternoon, or the boss is waiting on them to finish doing the POs so they can get the bills paid. So what happens, you create an environment where the person taking that phone call really just wants to get done with the phone call so they can do other stuff. The biggest mistake to me is not making sure that your admin, we already talked about training and all that, but is able to spend the time they need to spend on the phone with the person. They're not trying to hurry. They're not trying to rush. They're not distracted. Right. And that's what happens when you have somebody who's doing a lot of different things that's also selling. Now, it's not practical in all cases to have somebody who only takes sales calls, but the sooner you can get there, the better. To me, the biggest mistake is, and I see this time and time again, is pest control companies persist in having an admin person who's kind of does everything. And that's fine when you're small and you don't really have much of an option. Once you get to 2 or 3 people and you can really start breaking that out, or maybe, the sooner you can get one person doing nothing but sales as their primary responsibility, the better. Because then you can do all the things we've already talked. You can train them. You can make sure they understand the service. You can do all those things. You can work with them, overcoming objections, all that stuff. They can really focus on doing what you want them to do and do it well. If you expect your admin people to do 10 different things, they're not going to be able to do 10 different things as well as they can do one, right? They might do 1 or 2 of those things really well, but the other 8, they're just not going to be, unless they're a superstar, which there's few of those, but not many. So the biggest mistake, I think, is not making sure that whoever's handling your sales over the phone is able to dedicate the time and effort taking those calls without feeling like I got to hurry up and get off the phone. Because if that's the attitude when they answer, they're not going to sell as much, right? Because they're just trying to get through the call. Whereas to do all the stuff we've talked about, to build that relationship, to overcome those objections before they even have them, you got to have time. You got to feel comfortable in the fact that I can take 5 minutes on this call if I need to. I can take 3 minutes, whatever I got to do. I think that's the biggest mistake, is not setting your employees up for success and not understanding the value of what admin does and how crucial it is for them to be able to focus on certain things to do them.
I would absolutely echo that sentiment because I've seen it firsthand with our clients. The clients who are doing the best, growing the fastest, are the ones who have figured out sales. And when I have asked them about how they did it, one of the first things that they explain is that they broke up their team, between CSRs and inside sales people. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you do the math based on the numbers that on the data that we have across all of our clients that we've worked with, if you get, let's say you get 100 calls, and of those 100 calls, let's just focus on recurring sales. 70% of them could be sold as a recurring customer. Well, just back at the napkin math, if you're of those 70 qualified potential recurring customers, you're closing 60% of those, you're looking at potentially around 40 recurring customers that you could close. We're oversimplifying it here, but just to drive from the point, right? Now, if you're on the lower end of that spectrum, because 60% of qualified leads is on the higher end of what's possible. On the lower end, I've certainly seen that number be more like around 30%, right? So half of what your potential is. That's the difference between closing either 40 recurring customers or 20 recurring customers. And when you start to talk about average customer lifetime value, the total amount of money they're going to spend with you over the course of several years that they're going to be with you. I mean, we're looking at, let's say each customer is worth $3,500 to you over the lifetime that they're with you. That's $73,000 that you have lost out on in revenue from just 100 calls. Like it really makes a huge difference. And when you're making that mistake of not optimizing your sales team, right, and empowering them to do their best work, it is incredibly costly, even though you don't necessarily do that math, feel it, because it's an opportunity cost.
You're absolutely right. And another thing that companies do that what I see is we all know there's these companies out there just growing like super fast. They're really successful. They start up, boom, boom, boom. And that's because they're selling, and that's because they're selling over the phone, a lot of it, right? But what a lot of companies do is they have a branch, they have a branch manager. Well, the branch manager manages the people in the office. Oh, we're going to start selling over the phone. Well, the branch manager manages people. Your branch managers, unless you're really a special kind of branch manager, probably not the best person to manage your salespeople over the phone, because it's a completely different thing. It's completely different than what a technician does or things like that. Doesn't mean you can't have a manager that can successfully manage inside sales admin people, but the chances are you're not going to be as successful if you're setting it up that way. You need to have somebody, whether it's the owner or whoever it is, that's really overseeing that specific part of the job, right? That specific. And it can be your sales manager. Sales manager can oversee all your sales if you want. It depends on how you want to do it. We had a contact or call center manager who manages sales, but our call center had a budget, just like the branches. I mean, we had a sales budget. We were part of the sales team for our company. And I think the last year I was there was over $2 million in sales. I know we were a big company, 15 million a year, but still, that's a lot of sales. And they were generally measured better because there wasn't a person out there by themselves in a measuring wheel deciding that dog looked pretty scary. So I'm just going to guess how big the backyard is, right? They're measuring based off specific things. And now there's AI that can measure for you. You get a lot of benefits to that. But I think that's one thing too, is make sure the people managing the salespeople know what they're doing and are going to get you the best results out of it. Don't just throw them under a manager who's busy trying to keep customers happy and get revenue in and keep the chemical costs down and all those other things managers have to worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, Raymond and I have been sort of talking around this the whole time, but Voice for Pest does a lot of really cool stuff in the space, especially around AI and empowering your team to be a lot better. So Raymond, what's the best way for someone to get in contact with you, pest control operator who wants to explore optimizing this process with Voice for Pest?
Well, thank you for the opportunity for the shameless plug. I appreciate it. The best way to go is voiceforpest.com, just like it's right there. I know it's kind of upside down and backwards, but just go to voiceforpest.com. Our number's there. You fill out a web form. You can call us. However you want to get a hold of us. We'd love to talk to you. Love to help you. We've got a lot of customers in this industry. We kind of know what pest control companies need from a phone solution, I think, more than anybody else. And we'd love to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Raymond, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been great. Sorry I babbled a little bit here and there, but I really enjoyed it.
It was, you were dropping a lot of jewelry, and I think our audience will really appreciate it. So thank you again.
Good. All right. Thank you. Take care.